On a chilly autumn evening, the city park was alive with the soft rustling of fallen leaves and the distant hum of traffic. Ethan sat hunched on a worn-out bench, his thin jacket barely shielding him from the biting cold. His fingers trembled as he counted the few coins in his pocket, the clinking sound echoing louder in his ears than the bustling world around him. Ethan's face bore the marks of a hard life: sunken cheeks, weary eyes, and a beard that hadn't been trimmed in months. His shoes were frayed, the soles barely holding together, and his hands were calloused from days spent scavenging and nights battling the cold. Yet, his spirit remained unbroken, his heart holding on to a shred of hope that tomorrow might bring something better. The park, illuminated by flickering streetlights, was a stark contrast to Ethan's solitude. Families walked by, children laughed, and couples strolled hand in hand, wrapped in warm coats and scarves. Ethan watched them with a mix of longing and acceptance, his breath visible in the frosty air. As the evening grew darker, Ethan's stomach growled in protest, reminding him of how long it had been since his last meal. He tightened his grip on the coins, contemplating whether to spend them on a small meal or save them for another day. Just then, his gaze fell upon a woman standing near a diner, her silhouette framed by the soft glow of its neon sign. The woman looked distressed, clutching an empty purse and glancing around nervously. Ethan's heart ached at the sight of her. Despite his own struggles, he felt a pull, an inexplicable urge to help. Little did he know, this fleeting moment of compassion would become the turning point in his life, setting off a series of events that would change everything. Ethan hesitated for a moment, standing in the cold as the woman's distress became more apparent. Her hands shook as she tried to hold her purse steady, and her eyes darted around as if searching for an answer to an invisible problem. Taking a deep breath, Ethan approached her cautiously. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said, his voice gentle yet uncertain. "Is everything okay?" The woman turned, startled, her eyes meeting Ethan's. She seemed to hesitate before responding. I'm fine," she said, though her voice cracked under the weight of her worry. Ethan's gaze lingered on her trembling hands and the empty purse she clutched tightly. "It doesn't look like it," Ethan replied softly. "Is there something I can do to help?" Tears welled up in her eyes as she spoke. "My son, he's sick. I needed to buy his medicine, but Her words trailed off as she gestured to her purse. "I lost my wallet somewhere. I don't even have enough to get home." Ethan's heart sank. He knew the feeling of helplessness all too well. Without thinking, he reached into his pocket and pulled out the few coins he had left. "Here," he said, extending his hand. "It's not much, but maybe it can help." The woman stared at the coins in disbelief. "I can't take this from you," she said, shaking her head. "You look like you need it more than I do." Ethan managed a faint smile. "Sometimes, helping someone else makes you feel richer than anything money can buy. Please take it." Her hands trembled as she accepted the coins, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You don't know what this means to me." As she disappeared into the diner, Ethan stood there for a moment, his hands now empty, but his heart unexpectedly full. He turned and walked away, the cold biting at his skin, but a small warmth flickered within him, a warmth that came from knowing he had made a difference. The sun was just beginning to rise over the city, painting the sky in hues of orange and pink. Ethan sat on the same park bench, his thin coat pulled tightly around him as he tried to fight the lingering cold. His hands were shoved deep into his pockets, his breath visible in the frosty air. He hadn't expected much to change since the night before, but fate had a different plan. A sleek, black car pulled up to the curb nearby. Ethan glanced at it briefly, before turning his attention back to his thoughts. Moments later, the sound of approaching footsteps made him look up. To his surprise, it was the woman from the diner, now dressed in a clean, tailored coat, and carrying a small box in her hands. "Hi," she said softly, her voice filled with warmth and gratitude. I've been looking for you." Ethan blinked in confusion. "Me?" he asked, his voice unsure. She nodded, taking a step closer. "Yes, you. My name is Claire. I don't think I ever thanked you properly for what you did last night. You gave me your last dollar when you didn't even know me. Because of you, I was able to buy the medicine my son needed. You saved his life." Ethan's heart skipped a beat. I'm glad I could help," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Claire extended the box toward him. "I wanted to repay you. It's not much, but I hope it helps." Ethan hesitated before taking the box. Inside, he found a pair of warm gloves, a scarf, and a small envelope. He opened the envelope to find a note that read, "Your kindness reminded me of the good in this world. Use this to take care of yourself." Along with the note was a wad of cash, enough to buy food, clothes, and perhaps even a few nights in a warm room. Ethan's hands trembled as he looked back at Claire. "I can't accept this," he said, shaking his head. "You've already thanked me. That's enough." Claire smiled gently. "Please, take it. You gave me hope when I had none. Let me do the same for you." Tears welled up in Ethan's eyes as he nodded. "Thank you," he murmured, clutching the box tightly. "You didn't have to do this, but it means more than I can say." As Claire turned to leave, she glanced back at Ethan with a smile. "Kindness is never wasted," she said softly, before stepping into her car and driving away. Ethan sat there for a moment, staring at the box in his lap. For the first time in years, he felt a glimmer of hope, a sense that maybe, just maybe, things could get better. Ethan stood at the doorway of a modest apartment, the key trembling in his hand. It had been years since he'd had a place to call his own. The apartment was small but clean, with a single bed, a wooden table, and a tiny kitchen that felt more welcoming than any space he'd seen in a long time. Claire had arranged for him to rent it with the money she had given him, insisting it was the first step toward rebuilding his life. As Ethan unpacked the few belongings he had, a wave of memories flooded his mind. He recalled the days when he worked as a carpenter, crafting beautiful furniture with his hands. Back then, he had a thriving business, a home filled with laughter, and a sense of purpose. But life had taken a cruel turn. A devastating fire had destroyed his workshop, and without insurance, he was left with nothing. The financial burden led to the loss of his home, and he found himself on the streets with no one to turn to. Ethan shook off the memories and focused on the present. With Claire's encouragement, he had begun to see a glimmer of hope. Later that week, she visited him at the apartment, carrying a folder in her hands. "I've been thinking," she said with a smile. "Your skills as a carpenter could help so many people. I run a non-profit organization that builds and repairs homes for families in need. We're always looking for talented people to join our team. What do you think?" Ethan hesitated, his self-doubt creeping in. "I don't know, Claire. It's been so long since I've done anything like that. I'm not sure I'm good enough anymore." Claire placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "Ethan, you have a gift. And it's not just about the work. It's about making a difference in people's lives. You've already shown how much kindness you're capable of. This is your chance to turn that kindness into something bigger." Her words lingered in Ethan's mind long after she left. That night, he sat at the wooden table, running his fingers over its surface, as if rediscovering the joy of craftsmanship. Slowly, the spark he thought he had lost began to reignite. The next day, Ethan visited Claire's organization. The building buzzed with activity, volunteers hammering nails, painting walls, and loading trucks with supplies. Claire introduced him to the team, who welcomed him with warm smiles and firm handshakes. For the first time in years, Ethan felt a sense of belonging. He was assigned to a project repairing a rundown house for a single mother and her 2 children. As he picked up the tools, his hands moved instinctively, the muscle memory returning like an old friend. With each nail he hammered and each plank he sanded, his confidence grew. The family's gratitude and joy when they saw their home restored filled Ethan with a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in years. By the end of the week, Ethan was fully immersed in his work. Claire checked in on him one afternoon, finding him bent over a piece of wood, carefully carving intricate details. "I'd forgotten how much I love this," he admitted, glancing up at her with a smile. "I knew you would," she replied. "You're not just rebuilding homes, Ethan. You're rebuilding yourself." Ethan nodded, feeling the truth in her words. This was more than a second chance. It was a new beginning. Ethan stood under the warm glow of the afternoon sun, hammering the last nail into a wooden frame. The structure was small but sturdy, a new shelter for a family who had been living in a car for months. Sweat dripped down his forehead, but a satisfied smile crossed his face. Around him, volunteers worked tirelessly, inspired by his dedication. Ethan had become a cornerstone of Claire's nonprofit organization, not just for his carpentry skills, but for the hope he brought to every project. Over the months, Ethan's confidence grew. He had found purpose in his work, and each nail he hammered felt like a step closer to redemption. He often met people whose stories mirrored his own, individuals who had fallen on hard times, struggling to find their footing. One day, while working on a project for a single father and his 2 young daughters, Ethan paused to wipe his brow. The father approached him, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you," he said. "You're giving us more than a home. You're giving us hope." The words struck a chord in Ethan. He saw himself in the man's weary eyes, in the way he held his children close as if shielding them from the world. For the first time, Ethan truly understood the impact of his work. He wasn't just rebuilding homes, he was rebuilding lives. As the nonprofit grew, Claire organized a charity gala to raise funds and celebrate the team's achievements. Ethan was hesitant to attend, but Claire insisted. "You have a story that people need to hear," she told him. The event was held in a grand hall, adorned with twinkling lights and elegant decor. Ethan felt out of place in the borrowed suit Claire had insisted he wear. But as he looked around, he saw familiar faces, volunteers, families he had helped, and even some of the nonprofit's beneficiaries. When it was Ethan's turn to speak, he walked onto the stage, his hands trembling slightly. Taking a deep breath, he began. "A year ago, I was sitting on a park bench, wondering if I'd ever find a reason to keep going. I thought I had nothing left to give, but one small act of kindness changed everything. It reminded me that even in our darkest moments, we can still make a difference. Today, I stand here not as someone who was saved, but as someone who wants to pay it forward." The room was silent as Ethan shared his journey, the struggles, the loss, and the unexpected encounter with Claire that set him on a path to redemption. His words were raw and heartfelt, resonating with everyone in the audience. By the time he finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The applause was deafening, but Ethan's eyes searched for Claire, who stood at the back of the hall, her face glowing with pride. After the gala, people approached Ethan to thank him for his honesty and courage. Donations poured in, ensuring the nonprofit could expand its reach. Ethan felt a deep sense of fulfillment, knowing his story had inspired others to believe in second chances. Back at the workshop, Ethan continued to pour his heart into his work. He took on more challenging projects, mentoring younger volunteers and teaching them the value of perseverance and compassion. One day, a young man approached him, nervously clutching a piece of paper. "Mr. Ethan," he said, I heard your story. I've been living on the streets, and I want to change my life. Can you teach me?" Ethan saw a reflection of his former self in the young man's eyes. Smiling, he placed a hand on his shoulder. Of course, everyone deserves a second chance. Months turned into years, and Ethan's work continued to touch countless lives. He became a symbol of hope in the community, proof that even the smallest act of kindness could create ripples of change. Claire often watched him from a distance, her heart swelling with pride. She had always believed in Ethan, but seeing him thrive exceeded even her expectations. On the anniversary of his first project with the nonprofit, Ethan crafted a wooden plaque and hung it in the workshop. It read, "Kindness is never wasted." The words became the organization's unofficial motto, a reminder of the power of compassion. As Ethan locked up the workshop one evening, he stood outside for a moment, gazing at the stars. Life had come full circle, and while the journey had been far from easy, it was one he wouldn't trade for anything. With a renewed sense of purpose, he walked away, ready to face whatever the future held. Ethan sat at the workbench in the quiet workshop, the hum of the evening breeze filtering through the slightly open window. His hands moved deftly over the smooth surface of a wooden plaque, carefully carving the words, "Kindness is never wasted." Each stroke of the chisel felt purposeful, a reflection of the journey he had endured and the lessons he had learned along the way. The workshop, now bustling with activity during the day, had become a symbol of hope and second chances, not just for him, but for so many others. As he finished the final touches, he leaned back and studied his work. The plaque wasn't just a piece of wood. It was a testament to how far he had come. From a man sitting on a park bench, uncertain of his future, to someone who had found purpose in helping others, Ethan's transformation was nothing short of remarkable. Later that evening, Claire stopped by the workshop. She had a habit of checking in on Ethan, though she often pretended it was to inspect the projects. This time, she found him sitting by the plaque, lost in thought. "You've been busy," she said, her voice breaking his reverie. Ethan turned to her with a smile. "Just putting the finishing touches on something special," he replied, gesturing to the plaque. Claire stepped closer to read the inscription. Her eyes softened, and a warm smile spread across her face. "It's perfect," she said. "You've captured exactly what this place is about." Ethan nodded. "It's not just about me anymore," he said. "It's about everyone who walks through these doors. Every act of kindness has a ripple effect. And I've seen it firsthand." The two shared a moment of quiet gratitude, the kind that doesn't need words. Claire had believed in Ethan when he couldn't believe in himself, and now she watched as he became a beacon of hope for others. The ripple effect of Ethan's kindness was evident everywhere. A young man he had mentored now led his own team of volunteers, helping to repair homes for families in need. A single mother, whose house Ethan had rebuilt, had started a support group for others in similar situations. Even the workshop itself had expanded, with new tools and more hands to keep the projects going. One day, a woman walked into the workshop with her young son. She held a small bouquet of wildflowers, which she shyly handed to Ethan. "You don't know me," she said, "but my brother told me how you helped him. He's doing so much better now, and I wanted to thank you." Ethan accepted the flowers with a humbled smile. "Thank you," he said. "But it's not just me. It's everyone here. We all believe in giving people a second chance." That night, as the stars twinkled above the workshop, Ethan reflected on his journey. He thought about the moment he had given Claire his last dollar, and how that simple act had set off a chain of events he could never have imagined. Life hadn't just come full circle. It had expanded into something richer and more meaningful than he ever thought possible. The next morning, Ethan hung the wooden plaque in the center of the workshop, where everyone could see it. As the volunteers arrived and began their work, many paused to read the words. Some nodded in agreement, others smiled, and a few even touched the plaque, as if drawing strength from its message. Ethan watched them with a deep sense of fulfillment. The plaque wasn't just a reminder of his own journey. It was a beacon for everyone who walked through the doors. It was a testament to the power of kindness and the incredible transformations it could bring. As the day went on, Ethan found himself mentoring a new group of volunteers, sharing his skills and his story. He knew that every nail hammered, every piece of wood shaped, and every word of encouragement offered had the potential to change someone's life. And that was enough to keep him going. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of kindness and transformation. Ethan's story is a reminder of how even the smallest act of generosity can ripple outward, changing lives in ways we could never imagine. Now, we want to hear from you. When was the last time a small act of kindness changed your life, or someone else's? It could be a simple gesture, like helping a stranger, or a moment when someone's compassion made a difference for you. Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story could inspire someone else to make a change. Kindness has a power that transcends all barriers. It's the thread that connects us and reminds us of our shared humanity. As Ethan's journey shows, every act of compassion, no matter how small, has the potential to ignite hope and create lasting impact. If this story moved you, please don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with friends and family. Together, we can spread the message that kindness is never wasted. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.